Da, bună seara, doamnelor și domnilor. Am ajuns la ultimul moment al celei de-a doua zile a evenimentului CIO Council Virtual Summit. Ultimul eveniment este un invitat pe care, hai să spunem așa, l-am descoperit recent. And I'm going to switch in English because our guest is coming from United States. And as I said earlier, I discovered Mr. Joe Weiss recently, simply reading his blog, controlprocess.com, and or at least he has a lot of articles over there regarding, in particular, the industrial control systems, the control process area. And I realized that Mr. Joe Weiss is an expert in this control process area, and he has a very wide experiences. And moreover, I've noticed that he has a very strong voice into the IT and business community in the United States in claiming, or not claiming, but sharing idea that national critical infrastructure or industrial control systems are subjects to be hard to be protected. I wouldn't say impossible. It's not about impossible, but they have a lot of particularities in this respect. So I invited Joe. Joe, thank you very much for being with us. I know it's very early in Boston right now, if I remember exactly.
No, I'm actually on the other side of the country. I'm in California.
In California, sorry. Yeah, in California, which is 10 hours behind us. And thank you very much because you woke up very early today. Joe, what are you going to talk in front of a large area of CIOs and the Romanian IT professionals?
Well, what I'm going to do is I've got a presentation that's meant to explain what is control system cybersecurity. How is it different? What has really happened? And what can we do that can actually address control system cybersecurity? I can't address some of the limitations in IT, but there are ways to make intractable cyber problems tractable. So.
All right, Joe, so the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very, very much for the invite. And you know, I've always wanted to go to Bucharest and Eastern Europe, and I'm hoping when the pandemic is over, I'll be able to do that. So again, thank you very, very much for your the invitation. What I wanted to do is start with the title of my book, which is Protecting Industrial Control Systems from Electronic Threats. And the reason for the title, hacking control systems is not difficult. Protecting them is rocket science. And the reason it is because these systems have to work. And so you have to balance between how much security can I have put in before I actually prevent the systems from operating. And that's a very different, problem. I use the term industrial control systems, but I'm going to go through that in more detail in one of the next slides. But the point is, it's more than just quote unquote SCADA. And I also use the term from electronic threats. I deliberately didn't say hacking because I had given a presentation. Actually, I didn't. The US Navy did back at my conference that I started in 2002. They had given this in 2003. And the slides, the first two slides they put up, and this was in an open meeting, and it was on Navy letterhead. And the first was that a Navy destroyer was coming into the port of San Diego. And they had their high power pulse radar on. They had not shut it off. And as they came into the port of San Diego, that high-powered pulse radar system took out San Diego Gas and Electric and the San Diego Water Authority's SCADA systems. The second slide they put up was the Navy was doing radar testing are doing, pulse radar testing, if you will, in the Netherlands. And the electromagnetic interference, radio frequency interference from that testing blew up a pipeline. So the issue is, this is not just what I call the 12-year-old pimply-faced hacker sitting in front of a Windows screen. This is much more than that, and I'm going to go into that in more detail now. Again, I've been involved a long time. I'm a control system engineer that got into cyber, not the other way around. Just to give you an idea of how relevant all of this is, I've written book chapters for electric, water, and data centers. Why? They all use the same type of equipment with the same vulnerabilities. So this issue where we have these silos between industries has to be broken down. I mentioned that control systems are everywhere. You're looking at power plants, water systems, manufacturing. What you're looking at in the bottom left is a ventilator for COVID. That's a control system, very much. Is it cyber vulnerable? Yes. Is the manufacturing of that cyber vulnerable? Yes. And the final one I just happened to mention is mass transit. The point being, control systems are anything that monitor and control a physical process. And that's pretty much everything. I could have just had a picture of a building. A building measures pressure, level, flow, temperature, voltage, current, and then manipulates, pumps and valves and, for that matter, lighting systems. And like I say, deliberately don't use the term SCADA, supervisory control and data acquisition. It's all of these different types of systems. Now, most of you are familiar with the OSI 7-layer stack. In the control system world, we have what's called the Purdue reference model, and it's different. And what it's showing is that you go from the lowest level where you have sensors monitoring pressure, level, flow, et cetera, in real time, all the way up to where you would go to the cloud. And where we're most interested, and I'll be going through this in much more detail, is all the way down at the lowest level, level 0 and 1. That's your engineering systems. And again, I'll go through this more. We have no cybersecurity there. The cybersecurity starts being, implemented, as you're at, if you will, the Windows layer on up. Now, there's a couple of very, very, very important definitions I want to make pretty clear. The first is the word OT. I think most of you use the word, operational technology. OT was a term that was set up by Gartner, because Gartner didn't know what a control system was. So they basically said, if you're not IT, you're OT. OT is generally the control system networks. It is not the pumps, valves, heat exchangers, relays, or other things. And it's not the engineers either. OT is really more than the companion to IT when it comes to cybersecurity. The other one I want to talk about it a lot is the definition of what is a cyber incident. To IT, the de facto definition is you're connected to the internet, you're running Windows, and somebody's trying to steal or manipulate your data. Both the NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technologies, and the US Government Accountability Office have defined cyber, and the GAO definition is like about 3 or 4 months old. But it's electronic communication between systems that can affect confidentiality, integrity, or availability. The biggest point is it does not have to be malicious to be a cyber incident. And more than that, a sophisticated attacker is going to make a cyber attack look like an equipment malfunction. So As an engineer, I don't care why there's a problem. I just need to be able to identify it and do something about it. And then later on, I'll worry about, was it malicious? Was it unintentional or whatever? Now, how did we get to where we are today, which is a major, major, major cultural problem that we have to solve, or we will never be able to secure our control systems or critical infrastructure? This is not a new problem. PDD is Presidential Decision Directive 63. This was signed by President Clinton in 1998. How in the world can 25 years later, we're still not able to secure these systems? Now, here's the real point about why we have such a problem. Prior to 9/11, cyber was simply another risk for reliability and safety. The engineers owned everything about their equipment. So if they had a turbine, they were responsible for the turbine and the cybersecurity of the turbine. The thought that IT or anybody from networks would ever walk into a power plant or a water facility and say they were going to take it over or be responsible for anything affecting their equipment would be heresy. Well, following 9/11, and I do not have a date and I don't have a document, cyber was made national security. And when that happened, cybersecurity was removed from all of the engineering organizations pretty much everywhere and given to IT, or now you could say OT. When that happened, the engineers, the people responsible for the actual equipment, were severed from the world of cybersecurity. They were removed. The other thing that happened was, when it went to the IT organizations, to IT, cyber is the Internet Protocol Network and the equipment that is, part of the Internet Protocol Network. So routers, switches, firewalls, things like that. So all of our engineering equipment got left behind, which is why to this day, we really have no cybersecurity for any of the legacy sensors, actuators, drives, and I'll show you more pictures. But what I want to get across is the people that design, operate, and maintain these systems have effectively been removed. And the people responsible for the cybersecurity do not, in general, understand how they work. Literally last night on LinkedIn, there was a big discussion about OT. Are we training enough OT people? And the answer is wrong terms. Are we training enough engineering people? Now, this is the other thing I wanted to get across too. The control system world is arguably 5 to 10 years behind the IT world in cybersecurity. On top of that, the control system world simply doesn't have the computing horsepower to be able to put in the cybersecurity mitigation that's commonplace in IT. Well, what I want to get across is SolarWinds. It's been brought up a number of times. What SolarWinds proved is any IP network can be compromised by a sophisticated, dedicated nation state. Because there's a couple of things about SolarWinds that's important. Number one, they had all of the cybersecurity mitigation you can think of, most of which could never be employed on a control system, yet it was still compromised. The other thing that I think people need to understand, SolarWinds has been viewed as a network problem. But SolarWinds, because it implements SNMP, Simple Network Management Protocol, has allowed, in this case, the Russians who came up with the SolarWinds hack, the ability to own all of the building controls, because all of them are controlled by SNMP, which is implemented via SolarWinds. The thing, again, that makes things so difficult with control systems, and I've got many more pictures coming up, they are a system of systems. So you have to, live with, if you will, the weakest link in the chain. The protocols that we use are insecure. The devices are insecure. The term deterministic means they are very, very, very timing sensitive. If a process isn't, occurring within particular milliseconds, it's essentially been hacked. We do not have the liberty of taking time for things to happen. And so this has a very major effect on the cybersecurity methodologies that are out there, because they simply may not be applicable. And what I'm talking about, like I say, applies to all industries. Now, I showed or explained, and here's where I want to get across. This is my one, if you will, engineering techie picture. On the right is IT. As you start moving to the left, it becomes more and more engineering focused. Before Stuxnet, in other words, the hack of the programmable logic controllers in the centrifuges in Iran, cybersecurity ended with that little picture of the control room with the all of the operator screens. In other words, it went as far as Windows. So what happened was we had no cybersecurity in our PLCs or anything else. Well, following Stuxnet, our vendors started adding security there, though it wasn't until literally the past couple months that we started coming up with quote unquote secure coding practices for PLCs. But excuse me, what I really want to get across is on the left, valves, motors, sensors, where I have a funny way of describing it, where you go boom in the night. There is no cybersecurity. There is no authentication. There is no cyber logging in any of those types of equipment. Everything on that side is just assumed to be uncompromised, authenticated, and correct. And I'm going to show you a little bit later on where, in this case, the Chinese have used that to take over systems, not to steal data, but to literally control or damage them. Now, for everybody in the training world, the university world, et cetera, here's our problem. Cybersecurity is taught in computer science. There are very, very few universities anywhere that require a computer science major to take even an introductory course in engineering. Yet, you see with the 4 arrows, that's where most of the cybersecurity is coming from. On the other side, you have the process knowledge, the engineering. And almost none of our, again, almost, I can never say never, universities are engineering students required to take an introductory course in cybersecurity. So what we have are these two worlds diverging. And what I want to get across is you see that little red dot in the middle. Those are control system, not SCADA, control system, cybersecurity experts. And there are very, very, very few of those worldwide, quote unquote, on the defensive side. And that's what we need to grow, is not so much just the computer science types or the engineering types. We need to get both of them to understand the needs of the other, and that's not happening. And just to show you, this isn't just IT's problem. This is a quote from a friend of mine who had been working in the for a major international oil gas company for 35, 40 years. He was their instrumentation security expert. And what he said is, I have spent years talking to brick walls and brickheads about the lack of security in field devices. That's our sensors, actuators, and drives. The response is typically that they are air-gapped and that everything is safe and secure. Irrational fantasy at best. I am not alone in this quest, but I'm definitely in a minority. I go back to what I just told you before. That's the reason we've got to do something about this dot in the middle. Now, cyber control system cyber incidents are real. I'm going to show you some real cases. I've amassed a database, it is not public, of almost 12 million control system cyber incidents to date. There's been over 1,500 deaths, well over $90 billion in direct impacts, contributed to bankruptcies, and almost all of those cases, almost none of those cases, I should say, were identified as being cyber related. What you're looking at upper left, complete destruction of a turbine. A number of us think this was a targeted attack. What you see in the upper middle is the Aurora hardware vulnerability. This is where the Idaho National Lab in 2007 destroyed a 27-ton generator by simply remotely opening and reclosing relays and letting Mother Nature do the rest. And what's so important about this, there's no malware involved. This is simply using remote access, putting equipment into forbidden operating zones and letting physics destroy it. Upper right was the DC Metro train crash that killed 11. Again, control system cyber. Was it malicious? No, 11 people died. Middle left was the Pacific Gas and Electric San Bruno natural gas pipeline rupture. This destroyed a neighborhood. The Pacific Gas and Electric Company is now a convicted felon because of that. In the middle is the Bellingham, Washington Olympic pipeline. This is a gasoline pipeline rupture. 3 people died. 3 people went to jail because they refused to cooperate with the National Transportation Safety Board. And the San Bruno natural gas pipeline rupture, the Olympic pipeline rupture, were very similar from a control system cyber perspective. And there is no guidance to this day about what to do about it. On the right middle is the Marucci wastewater attack in 2000. That's where a disgruntled employee remotely opened sewage discharge valves and dumped about, I don't know, I think it was 100,000 gallons of sewage on the grounds of the Hyatt Regency. The attacker was caught the 46th time he did it on a traffic stop. If you think you're going to know this stuff right away, the answer is no. Bottom left was hacking of the buoyancy system in an offshore oil platform that actually tipped the platform and shut it down. That's not hypothetical, that really happened. Bottom middle was a 6,400 megawatt dam in Russia. It wasn't malicious, though Russia initially thought the US did it. This lifted a 1,000-ton turbine off its pedestal, caused the complete destruction of this 6,400 megawatt hydro station, and killed 75. Bottom right is a brand new Navy ship that had to be towed in because of control system cyber incident or issues that damaged the propulsion system. So part of what I want to get across is this is not unique to any industry. These are not things that a network engineer would necessarily see, only this is really very important. And then the other thing I wanted to point out, control systems are never supposed to be connected to the internet. Yet a friend of mine who was collecting this information and stopped a couple years ago. As of a couple years ago, there were more than 2 million control system devices directly connected to the internet. A lot of these are serial to Ethernet converters. This is really how the Russians cyber attacked the Ukraine in 2015, was exactly that. Now, I want to get to what's happened with the Chinese and the US electric grid. And everything I'm talking about here applies to Romania, all of Europe, all of Asia, everywhere. And I think most of you are familiar with the term the Maginot Line from World War II. Well, what we do today for cybersecurity is we monitor the networks. That's our Maginot Line. What China did was install hardware backdoors inside that 500-ton transformer so that they could remotely access it, not to steal information, but to take control of that equipment, to either damage it or take control of the grid. And I'm going to now start going through. This culminated in May of last year. This was President Trump who issued Presidential Executive Order 13920. And unfortunately, that executive order has been suspended by President Biden. And they're going to need to go back and look, because we've now found a second large transformer, Chinese-made transformer with these hardware backdoors. In the US today, there are over 300 of these Chinese transformers in the US electric grid. And again, think about this. We already know the issues, and I'm not trying to push on China, but China makes the equipment. We already have the issue with the Huawei chips, with the 5G networks. We have Lenovo PCs with keystroke loggers. And now this has been scaled up not to steal data, but to literally take control of systems. Now, I'm now jumping to the sensor world, and I'm doing that because this is going to go back and address not only what's going on with the Chinese transformers, but also what Israel recently has said that they're going to do for cybersecurity of all of their water systems. What I want to go back to is we have no cybersecurity in anything we measure to this day, which means you have no resilience. What we measure, pressure, level, flow, temperature, voltage, current, motor speed, that's everything everywhere. There is no cybersecurity, no authentication, no cyber logging. Yet all of our network monitoring assumes the measurement is uncompromised, authenticated, and correct, which means all of that data in your OT networks is untrusted. You know, you're doing all of this wonderful cybersecurity on trusted data. The sensors also act as safety interlocks. They can't be bypassed. Think of your home office shredder. If you load too much paper in a short period of time, that shredder will simply stop. Why? There's a temperature sensor in it. And when it heats up, that shredder won't go any longer, and it won't restart until the sensor says the temperature is back down. Well, you can't bypass that. Those sensors are in all of our equipment. The reason now for also bringing up the Chinese transformer and what we're talking about is what the Chinese did was to set up, essentially like with Stuxnet, the ability to send spoofed, in other words, not real sensor signals. Our equipment is 100% trusted. I think you've all heard the term zero trust. In the control system world, it's exactly opposite. It's 100% trust. When that equipment gets a signal. It doesn't ask, is this really coming from where I thought it was coming from? It simply takes that signal and does what it's been programmed to do. And it does it instantaneously in milliseconds. So we need to know, are the sensors that are measuring voltage, current, temperature, etc., inside that large transformer, are they coming from inside the transformer, meaning can we trust it? Or is it coming from somewhere else? That may be one of the few ways we can actually know what's happening. And I'm going to show you a real case in a few minutes about how something like this can also help us live with ransomware, of all things. The safety issues, SIS stands for Safety Integrated Systems. These are the safety systems in refineries, pipelines, water systems. And what you're seeing is the contributors to the dangerous failure modes. 42% are the sensors. And what are they going to try to do? They're going to try to improve, if you will, the sensors by improving the robustness and smartness. Smartness means remote access. Smartness means you're going to make those sensors cyber vulnerable. So here you have the engineering world who's going to take an approach to try to do something about a problem without having considered the cyber aspect on something that the cyber people don't even know or care about. You know, I keep going back. We have a culture problem. Now, I want to show you what happens with a sensor failure. This was an earthen dam in Missouri. And what happened was it had a couple of level sensors inside the earthen wall of the dam. You measure level by what's called height. Well, those sensors, the attachments to the wall broke and they came out from the wall. Was this malicious? No. In a sense, could this stuff be? Yes. What it was doing was sending erroneous low-level indications to the SCADA system at the utility 100 miles away. The SCADA system sees, hey, we're at low level. What did it do? It turned on the pumps and it kept filling the upper reservoir of that dam until it collapsed. There were billions of gallons of water that spilled. It destroyed a ranger's house. This was in December. In June, it would have killed about 250 Boy Scouts because there was a Boy Scout camp at the base of that mountain. But just to show you, and it took roughly 4 years to repair. This is very different. I know I'm getting late, so I want to keep going real quick, so bear with me. What you're looking at is about 4, 5, 6 weeks ago, the Israeli Water Authority selected a vendor, and I'm not going to name names, for monitoring all of the water systems in Israel. Why? They are scared to death that Iran is going to try to poison the populace. Well, what they did is said, we know IP networks can be hacked. We need to have a way that can't be hacked. So what they are doing is looking at the integrity of the sensors, not the networks, the sensors. And what you're looking at the top is this was a system that was installed in Jerusalem Water. It was monitoring, if you will, the electrical characteristics of the sensors in real time. It's the physics. You can't hack physics. It was offline, so it couldn't go down. While they were doing this work, and they were really trying to monitor pumps, they weren't trying to do cybersecurity. Where you see the white in that top figure is where the Windows-based SCADA went down. That's your OT network. It went down. Was it hacked? No. Could it have been? The point being, this offline sensor network kept working, even with the OT network down. which also means when you have ransomware, it can't reach this. When you have any IT malware, it can't reach that. As long as you keep that offline, we can address an intractable problem in the control system world. What we're talking about is changing the paradigm. Instead of living on network anomaly detection, we want to live on process anomaly detection. We want to keep the lights on and the water flowing, not focus on, is the network up? This is where everything started 20 years ago before I said IT got involved and totally twisted it. We need to go back for control systems and make it a tractable engineering problem and combine it with the network problem. This is ground truth. If this diverges or is different than the networks have a problem. This is ground truth. And this is my last slide. This is the benefits. Why do this? We make an intractable network problem a tractable engineering problem. I can't do this for data. I can do it for control. Okay. It doesn't, the beauty of this is not for cyber. This is saying, is the process doing what it's supposed to do? It's identifying when to take out our toolkits, when to look for cyber, when to look for a sensor problem or a pump or a valve problem or whatever. This can tell us what we don't know today. When to look. It's real return on investment because you're improving the process. You're extending maintenance intervals. Cyber comes along for the ride. This is not insurance. It reduces the threat space, if you will. If the ransomware providers realize you can keep operating, you become maybe less of a target, okay? But the biggest thing is, what we're doing for control systems is going back to where we were 30 years ago and making it an engineering problem and saying, if there's a problem, what does it mean? Don't look at vulnerabilities, look at impacts. That's what's been lost. So with that, I apologize for taking too much time. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But I hope this gives you a little bit different take.
Joel, thank you very much for the presentation. It was really valuable. That's a completely different perspective, or a perspective which should be definitely considered by the CIOs, which are probably into working in the industrial control systems. Anyway, when you said initially that protecting, it's a rocket science, protecting the process system, it's a rocket science, I didn't believe you, but after all you've said, it looks like turns to become a very cumbersome problem. And just for my curiosity, what's the ending of the story with the Chinese transformer bought in the New York system, into New York City?
I mean, what's happening, I'll give you not the ending, I'll give you where we are today. What has happened is a colleague of mine, there is a company in San Jose, California, 20 miles from where I live. And I'm going to say things that may sound political. They're not meant to be political. This is all real. It's essentially a Chinese front company. It represents the Chinese transformer manufacturers, Beijing Electric Power, and about 3 or 4 other Chinese companies. What my friend did was get the bills of lading for 158 pieces of Chinese-made equipment that's in our electric grids today. and filed a complaint with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission with the comments that were due last week, because the NERC critical infrastructure protection standards, you know, the cybersecurity standards for the electric industry. What is so interesting is 13920 identified all of the equipment that was in scope. It's all of the hardware, all of the control systems, all of it is out of scope for the NERC SIPs. Everything that's in the NERC SIPs, which is all the network stuff, is out of scope for that 13920. Number one, this is going to force a reevaluation of the suspension of that executive order. Part of that, what that was supposed to have done was kept utilities, US utilities, from buying Chinese equipment. Last year, there were 54 new high voltage transformers bought from China in the US grids. By the way, everything I'm saying, I'm sure applies directly to Romania.
Yeah, I guess, sure, go on.
Utilities are still buying them. We are, you know, we have a cartoon here in the States called Pogo. And what it says is, we have met the enemy and they is us. We are the problem. So where this all stands is there is a formal complaint that's been filed. Here's another interesting thing. Moody's, you know, the credit rating agency, put out a report, short one, May 6th or 7th of last year, after Executive Order 13920 was issued, saying that meeting 13920 was credit positive. That's when we only knew about one transformer with the backdoors. Now we have at least two. So Moody's, you know, that was issued because of risk. You know, think of everybody talking about insurance. This is risk. The risk has not gone down, it's gone up. So you now have, this is a really, really, really interesting problem.
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. Basically, there are a lot of messages into your presentation. First of all, that the industrial control system is pretty hard to be protected. And I've seen that what you've adopted for the water system in Israel should be a good example for all the people, all our practitioners that work in the industrial control systems. And I really like it, the, you know, process anomaly detections versus the network anomaly detections. And yeah, there are a lot of things when it comes to ICS systems, which starts actually from the PLCs, that they start to be secured, but when it comes to all the machineries, the problem still remains, and it will not be correcting. The next 5 to 10 years will always be behind the attackers, because we cannot actually assure the security according to the best practices we had in IT, because of this lack of unsecure by design. Actually, this is the problem. This is a legacy system. This is absolutely clear. So you're changing the paradigm you mentioned. This is probably the approach. Well, Joe, I will invite you to have a separate session with the CIO Council member and to speak more time directly focused on this area. We highly appreciate your presence, Joe. It was really valuable to be with us. And we definitely set up this meeting by the end of this year to have this, you know, to discuss more time about this topic. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and I really look forward to that.
Thank you very much, Joe. Now, because we're going to switch in Romania, because we actually go back to our, I mean, we end up this day. Thank you very much again, Joe.